Well, now to today's top story, the verdict, not guilty. That was the decision of a Connecticut jury Thursday in the murder trial of Cherelle Baldwin. We first reported on the case yesterday, just hours before the jury acquitted Baldwin, a 24-year-old mother. She was charged with the 2013 killing of her ex-boyfriend, Jeffrey Brown, whom Baldwin says had stalked and abused her. According to court documents, Brown had repeatedly threatened Baldwin, took her credit cards and money, assaulted her during visits to see their son. Baldwin eventually attained a court order barring threats, harassment, and assaults by him during his visits. But Brown continued sending Baldwin threatening text messages. Then, according to a police affidavit based on Baldwin's statements, Brown showed up at her house, climbed through her window, and attacked her, choking her with his belt. Baldwin escaped and managed to get inside her car, but so did Brown, who again choked her. What happened next is hard for even Baldwin to remember, but when police arrived, they found her on the ground with a broken leg, and Brown was lifeless in front of the car, pinned against the garage wall. Baldwin was eventually arrested on murder charges.
Since the incident, Cherelle Baldwin has spent nearly 3 years in prison, held on a $1 million bond. A first trial in 2015 ended in a hung jury. 11-1 was declared a mistrial in her favor, the 11-1. Prosecutors moved to retry Cherelle. After the non-guilty verdict was read, Cherelle Baldwin fell to the floor sobbing, saying, "My baby is going to get his mommy back." Jeffrey Brown's father, Jeffrey Hines, said he respected the decision of the jury. He pointed to a class ring he wears, which has a symbol of the scales of justice, and said, "They made a decision, that's it." The case has caught the attention of domestic violence organizations nationwide, who cited the case as an example of how Black women are disproportionately imprisoned when they defend themselves against domestic abuse. Well, today, in a Democracy Now! Exclusive, Cherelle Baldwin joins us in our studio for her first interview since being freed yesterday. Also with us is her mother, Cynthia Long, who we spoke to yesterday on Democracy Now! In Bridgeport, but today she is with us in New York, and her attorney, defense attorney Miles Greddy. Thank you so much for joining us all. Cherelle, welcome to the free world.
Thank you so much.
How did you feel when you heard that verdict yesterday in the Bridgeport courtroom?
I just, collapsed. I couldn't believe it. When they said not guilty of all 5 accounts, it was just like God sent an angel down and saved me. It was amazing.
You'd been in prison for nearly 3 years.
Yes.
Awaiting this trial.
Yes.
What's it been like in terms of, you have a 5-year-old son. How did you were able to maintain relations with him during that period of time that you were in prison? And what's been his reaction now that you're back out? Well,
he hasn't seen me yet, but I'm going to see him on Monday. But I will see him twice a month up at York CI Correctional Facility. And the whole time he thought I was at school. He didn't know that I was in jail because we wore burgundy shirts and jeans, so he thought I was at school. But he said to me last weekend, he was like, "Mommy, when you come home, we're gonna play Lego Batman." And I said, I promise you, when I come home, I'm gonna play Lego Batman with you. And I'm gonna keep my promise. When he come home Monday, I'm gonna play Lego Batman all day with him.
Cynthia Long, we spoke to you yesterday, just before the verdict. We didn't know how long the jury would be out, but what was your response?
I was just totally overjoyed, and I was so happy because I believed that my daughter was innocent the whole time. And I am just so grateful that the jury got to hear her side of the story and that, they made the right decision. It's just overwhelming, with tears because, there's so many domestic violence victims out there that are still struggling in the jail for fighting back. And, I'm just so grateful that, everything turned out well for Cherelle.
And Miles Garrity, could you talk about how you got involved in the case and also the significance of the case, especially in light of the fact that there was this history of abuse that existed beforehand? Why the prosecutors even attempted a murder conviction?
I got involved when I was told about the facts of this case. And Cherelle had a nice, really good lawyer, but who hadn't tried any murder cases. So I got involved for the first trial and then again for the second trial. You know, battered women, when they step out of the role and defend themselves, there's a lot of prejudice. I mean, a lot of jurors, a lot of men especially, once a woman steps out of that role, will think, oh, she's not battered, or see avenues of escape. You know, Cherelle was in her bedroom, and you mentioned a window, but we don't know how he got in. Cherelle was in her bedroom, was attacked in her bedroom, choked and whipped horrifically. I mean, she's got, not even noted, by the way, when she got to the hospital. She crashed her car into a cement wall going 21 miles an hour, 30.8 feet per second. So she's concussed. She wakes up next to the car, not really knowing what had happened, because she had retrograde amnesia. Because she didn't know how it happened and what had happened, the assumption was that she was lying. And so you have this woman who is one of the nicest, sweetest people on earth, who wouldn't hurt a fly, who was desperate to get back to her child, to save her child. You know,
because her baby was inside.
Inside, crying when she left. And the thing that gets me...
He was, what, 18 months old?
18 months. And when Cherelle... Okay, there's a thing called the Castle Doctrine in most states. You have a right... You don't have to retreat from your own home. The court ruled in 2 trials that as soon as she stepped off her porch, as soon as she stepped out of her house, that doctrine didn't apply. Which would mean if a woman was attacked in her home and thrown out the window when she's on the grass of her neighbor, suddenly she doesn't. Her duty of care towards her attackers has changed.
And even though her garage is part of her home,
right? And what a lot of women's groups are saying, first place, there ought to be a virtual Castle Doctrine. If there's a court order saying you're not to be attacked, you're not to be harassed, you ought not to have the duty to retreat. And, you know, as much talk as there is of stand your ground, this is a situation where Cherelle, being slight at the time, you know, smaller than Jeffrey Brown, not having, you know, women are likely to own a gun. A third is, you know, 3 times as many men have guns. If she was bigger and stronger and beat him to death in her apartment, she never would have been charged. But as soon as she leaves her home, they changed it. And that's wrong. I mean, that is really... That law needs to be changed. And, you know, it's amazing to me that in 2016, we're still dealing with the societal pressures, you know, where if a woman defends herself, suddenly she's complicit in her battering. And it, you know, this is really a problem. And
we're going to break, and when we come back, we're also going to talk about what this $1 million bond was. I mean, a year ago, another trial was deadlocked, 11-1, in Cherelle's favor. And she had to remain in prison simply because she could not afford the bond that a more well-off woman could have afforded. Cherelle Baldwin is with us. Not guilty on all counts was the decision of the jury yesterday in the death of her abusive ex-partner. We're also joined by her mother, Cynthia Long, and her attorney, Miles Garrity. We'll be back with them in a minute.